It's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, February 28th for the Charter Review Committee. First appointment is Phyllis Luck, who asked to be first on the agenda because she's going to another meeting. She wanted to talk to us about a proposal regarding write-in candidates, and when I drafted some proposed language, I came up with a slightly expanded part. So Phyllis, do you want to talk about what you were thinking about?
Sure. When at the MMA, I talked to legislators and people from other communities.
If you could just so the camera can be
sorry.
included with you. You don't have to talk to the camera, but.
And we were discussing that some towns have a minimum for write-ins. That if to be put on the ballot, you need to get 42 signatures, and it would seem to me that that should be the minimum number of write-in votes that you should get, because otherwise, why bother getting the signatures? Why not put your name in for a write-in and you can get elected with 3 votes? So it seemed the minimum that should be expected for a write-in too.
And what I did was expanded a little bit and said that whether somebody was on the ballot or in a write-in, I said they both should have the same number. And the 42 signatures comes from the state law that provides that it's 10% of the last election at which the governor was elected. I can't remember exactly what it is. So therefore, whatever that case was, there were 420 people who voted, and therefore the count was 10%. So that's what it would be tied to. So if you're not nominated as a caucus, you would need, and you want to be on the ballot, you have to get 42 certified signatures to get on the town election.
And that stays, right? I mean, it doesn't move with governor elections.
It could go up or down.
Oh,
So
it could.
if you had more people in town come out to vote, it could go up to 50, or if you had fewer, it could go to a lower number.
But the number of signatures changes too, so you'd always know it going into the election.
Oh.
All right, so each election, if someone wants to be on the ballot and does not get nominated at the caucus, they know based on the last election how many signatures they need. And what I think I hear you saying is it would be the same number that you would be required for a write-in.
Yes.
Right.
Can I just ask, how many votes does it require at the caucus to be on the ballot?
So
Is there a minimum number of votes at the caucus?
there's no minimum.
And should there be, if we're going to say that you have to have a
Well,
minimum for a write-in?
the caucus is actually a Citizens Party caucus. I don't know whether that's subject to the caucus. It theoretically could be if we wanted it to be, but so right now somebody gets nominated, and if the chair accepts a vote, the chair will cast 1 vote for that person. That person gets on the ballot with 1 vote.
Okay.
And then there have been write-ins over the years. Recently, 2 years ago, there was a Board of Health vacancy. George Eamon did not run re-election, and he ended up having 12 votes write-in, and Troy Daniels had 6 votes write-ins. And George chose to accept. If he chose not to, then it could have gone to Troy, and he could have accepted or not at that point. So this happened with the Sewer Commission. And I remember way back when the town auditor, before we had a town accountant, was elected with 5 votes. So it's not unusual for this to happen. Usually with the positions that nobody's running for.
Yes.
May I ask a question? Then if in any of those scenarios you didn't meet 42, then you have no winner.
So what would happen is that that position would be declared vacant, and then it goes to the part of the charter that for a multi-member board vacancy, it would be the remaining members of that board and the Board of Selectmen voting together.
Becomes an appointed position.
Well, they appoint the person to fill out that term until the next election, and then they either have to run or be able to run against them. So what it does is it moves it from the town voting with few numbers to the selectmen plus whatever the multi-member board is.
And I missed the part in the notes, if you wouldn't mind just being a bit repetitive here, Ms. Luck, on the how to get to that 42.
Oh.
That goes to, it's 10% of the town's vote in a previous election. I think it's the governor's, we have to find out exactly what it was, but it's state.
It's MGL.
It's,
Okay.
yeah, it's state law that says that.
And then would there be a reason why it would necessarily be tied to the number of signatures and not the number of total voters for that office? So if 42 votes were cast for that office, should whoever won get it? Like, so if there were...
That would be hard to keep track of, because you gotta have the number up front.
No, you have the number up front. You know that there's 42 signatures that would be required.
Right.
And if 42 votes are cast on that ballot and 10 is the most that any one write-in got, should that person then get the position, or should it really be 42? Because it makes no sense that you would go from, okay, so I get 30, and I don't get the position, but now it's going to be appointed by 10 people.
Right.
So to me, it's kind of,
Well, my thinking is that it takes 42 votes to get on the ballot, so that, I think that's kind of,
But not through caucus.
not for caucus. Well, for caucus, you have to show, people have to show up. It's like town meeting, If not many people go to caucus, then you're not going to get very many votes. It kind of depends on how many people you can get to go to caucus.
So the only thing about the 42 signatures to get on the ballot is that a lot of times people say, you don't have to support me, I just want to get on the ballot. So those 42 votes are not necessarily supportive of that person. I understand where you're coming from, but it's not really 42 votes for that person. Some people choose not to sign for something they don't like, but...
I'll sign anything to put it on the ballot, because I just
Yeah.
believe that everything should be on,
Sure.
So I'll sign it whether I support that.
All right, so
person or
let me
not.
be a real stickler here. If
Yeah.
I get my 42 signatures and run for office, but only get 30 votes,
So the way this is written is that'd be considered a vacancy.
You
Why?
wouldn't get it.
You wouldn't get it.
oh,
And
so
then
this
you have-
doesn't only apply to write-ins?
The way it's written right now.
Okay.
30
Wait,
votes would be more than the 10.
And the reason I put that in there is that if we're going to have the standard for write-ins, shouldn't be the same standard for other people. Because we really want, it's almost getting to say we really want to have a minimum number of votes that the people are getting in order to be elected. That's effectively what it is. It's that somebody getting elected with 10 votes, is that really an indication from the town? Well, at the same time, if they choose to accept it, they've effectively volunteered for the position. Now, they could have filled out a talent bank application, they could have gone to caucus, I don't know.
I'm fine with it, I just wanted to make that.
I think one thing I'm thinking of too, if there's things that you have trouble bringing people in that if somehow you randomly get somebody in to be on sewer commission or something, it's an avenue of capturing somebody, and why restrict that? And does anybody do this?
Yeah, capture is a good word.
Does anybody do this?
So what to play it out practically and somewhat politically, is that if you have 4 people who each get 2 to 10 votes each, and they don't get elected, now the joint boards could say, of those 4 or 5 people who got write-in votes, are you interested in being appointed to the position? Interview all of them, and there might actually be a better public process by which you're actually making the decision. Now, the boards could still choose to say, you got 5 votes, but we choose not to appoint you. They don't have to appoint somebody, but this is why we're having this discussion.
So they don't have to appoint somebody that ran and got votes, they can just get somebody else.
Yeah.
Not required.
If they don't get the 42.
So let me just jump to some procedural for tonight, is that there were new ideas that were sent to the commission for tonight's meeting. This is one of them. If we all have a feeling of, we pretty much feel comfortable going ahead with these ideas, any of your votes tonight are not final. A little bit like signing the signatures to get somebody on the ballot. It's where are you indicating going forward? Is this something you want to go forward to have additional discussion, or is it absolutely you don't want it? That's going to be how I'm going to ask for the votes tonight. So we get rid of things that aren't going to have enough votes to get it forward anyways. And if it's something we definitely want, we want to say yes, okay, we can actually do that. If it's I like the idea, but I want to explore it, maybe we'll want to write it a little differently. So we have 3 different options for voting. So does anyone not support the concept of this proposal?
I only support part of it. I think that I agree with Ms. Luck on the 42 votes and the 10% threshold, but I think that if you're on the ballot and you get 5 votes and that's the majority, then you win. So I don't support the idea of setting a threshold of, well, you must get at least this much.
So you're saying that you did something to get on the ballot. You either were elected at caucus, or you got 42 signatures, so you've already done that work. So if in the election you only got 5 votes, then
You win.
you win.
But if you're a write-in, then I would
Let
support
me push
you.
back on you one bit, Michael. If you got your 5 votes, but I got 41 as a write-in,
Yeah,
do you think you should get elected and not me?
that's a good point.
Becomes very awkward.
Yeah.
The winner should win.
You know, I kind of think that. You know, if you got nominated at caucus, or you got 42 signatures, I think you're going to do enough work to get 42 votes.
What about a language then that says, that separates the two and says if it's just one person on, I guess that differentiates that. I don't know how you would do this, but in a way, I kind of feel like the person who gets the 5 should win, even though it clearly doesn't make any sense, because by numbers, more people clearly voted for the other person. So I think the difficulty, I guess, that I'm having a hard time stomaching is, what's the point then of going through the whole process of getting these 42 signatures if at the end of the day you can just write someone in and it's treated the same?
Okay, just to throw something else out there, I would be open to the notion of, if the winner, regardless of whether it was write-in or it was through the election process, received less than 41 votes, then they would be an interim appointment, an automatic interim appointment until the next election.
Can I put
Instead of just as an appointment by the committees.
something like this could fail the charter, too. We always have to go back to the...
Right, oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So we put something finicky like this, people could grab a hold of it, and then all the other work goes away.
Yep.
Because this is a confusing thing.
Yeah, no, and I think that basically as it's written or as it's considered, I would be opposed.
And to answer your question, right now, if this wasn't here and you had somebody who ran for office, you concurrently have somebody run write-in candidate against that person, and there have been stories when people have won because of the write-in against without nomination paper. So what I'm hearing, anybody else not want to support it?
I don't support it.
Okay.
I think it gets really confusing and tricky, and a write-in, what makes that complicated is you're not on the ballot, and you would have to do so much work anyways. And so to put something else there to get in the way of somebody taking, I don't think people usually take that approach because they want to. It's usually something else that got in their way, or too last minute or something like that.
I mean, people have gotten elected with 5 votes.
And I just think then the advantage of the caucus or drawing papers is you're on the ballot, and that is in and of itself an easier way to do a campaign. Write-ins are part of the process, and I don't know why we would go out of our way to take that away.
Right, and I think the other part about the caucus thing that's interesting to me is that if you have 2 positions to fill and 3 people are up, and if the top 2 don't necessarily have to get 42 votes, but the 3rd person, if they still want to be on the ballot, has to go out and get 42 signatures. That to me also just seems odd. But then again, I don't come from a town, so the whole caucus thing is a mystery to me. So, but to me, it doesn't make sense that somebody who gets 20 votes should necessarily appear on the ballot because of the caucus process, but somebody else can't appear unless they get 42 signatures. Do you know what I mean? But, again, I'm just going to go back to, I've only been to 1 caucus. I didn't understand what was happening while I was sitting there. But it didn't seem to me that there were enough people for anybody to get 42 votes.
Well, the first time I ran, it was pretty competitive, and Tom Alonso, who had been a selectman forever, didn't receive a nomination because myself and the other person running against me drummed up so many people to go to caucus.
Right, I
so
think that
it
was
would
the
be on the
bucket
ballot.
too, right, yeah.
Right. So, we got a good number of votes, and he had to get 42 signatures, which wasn't hard.
So what is the real goal here, if this was accomplished?
That people don't get elected with 3 votes.
Even if they're the winner?
Well, if they're a write-in and no one else is on the ballot, they would win with 3 votes. And it seems to me that people why would I bother getting 42 signatures to be on the ballot if I can just
Because
be
you'll be on
write-in?
the ballot. And if you opted to not get the signatures, you have to get people to fill it all in, and that's a much harder process. I think that's the motivation for collecting the signatures, is to be on the ballot.
Yeah, it is, but, there's also the scenario where people can, for a joke, write in somebody who, they don't really want to be in the spot, but they're just doing it for a joke.
But if the person won in that case and it was a joke, they could decline.
They could decline.
Katie, I wholeheartedly agree with you on this one. It sounds as though the 3 of us, though, are in agreement on this at least, which means that we don't have a threshold for this to pass.
Yeah, I think
I'm
Nancy
with
was
you.
just-
I'm comfortable with it.
But my question, I guess, for the 4 of us is, could we accept language that said an uncontested write-in must have a minimum of 42 votes?
No.
Why?
Because basically, if there's an uncontested write-in, then that means that nobody wanted the position. And if you've got somebody who's willing to take the position, who other people feel confident can do that, then why not let them?
3 people feel confident they can
Well,
do
this
that?
I don't know. See, I don't know the history. I would need to see the history and the trend analysis in terms of, but given how many vacancies there are on committees, and to me, it's just, I'm not sure I'm willing to, at this point, change that in the charter without...
See, I think if 400 people come out and vote,
Yeah.
and somebody gets 3 votes, that doesn't mean anybody wanted that person.
Of course, it may mean they don't know that that person would be interested in it because there wasn't a write-in campaign. That's part of the issue, is that a write-in campaign, you're going to get more than 3 votes.
Right.
So the question becomes, when you get 3 or 4 people or 10 people, there's 10 people that said, I think this person, now maybe they all said, they drove down the street and said, everybody on your street, make sure you come out and vote for this person. Mini campaign. I don't know.
But it's also, to me, and that's why I'm willing to, or I would look at okay, so if that's uncomfortable, then fine. If there's not enough interest in the position for somebody to run, and you want to make an interim, have a threshold that if there's not this many votes obtained, then instead of it being a 5-year appointment, it becomes an interim until the next election, and then they would have to run. That I could see, but I'm not sure if I'm at this point given. I wouldn't vote to support this, and I wouldn't vote to support, I think, anything tonight. So, without looking at more information, because I don't know what those positions are.
Mike, any thoughts?
I was one of the scenarios that you put up. I showed up at a caucus, nobody ran for school committee. And I went up at the end of the meeting and said, well, what are you doing? They said, take out papers and put your name on the ballot. And so I didn't do it. I wasn't a write-in. I went out, got signatures, got my name on the ballot, was the only one on the ballot, was on the school committee.
Right, and it's not that much work.
No.
So, I kind of feel like you should be willing to put some effort in. It's these volunteer positions are very important. You need people who want to do the work.
But I guess the question is, what we would need to do is to look at the positions where the people were elected. So for instance, George Eamon was elected with 10 votes. Do we think George Eamon should have been elected with 10 votes? He's been on the Board of Health and he has the experience to be on it, but that's the decision that those 10 people did. And oh, by the way, the rest of the town didn't take an action to find somebody to fill that position. So the town gets what it votes for, or doesn't vote for. So, I do like your twist that if it's under 42, that it be an interim appointment till the next election, as opposed to being a
full, going for the whole 3 years or 5 years. I do like that as a compromise.
Well, let's think this through. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, I'm not taking a position, because I'm still grinding this one.
Because if you end up making an appointment, if no one gets elected, you make an appointment, that is the way it goes. It is till the next election. So that makes sense.
Which would give that person an advantage in the next election, because
Yes.
obviously they're already in the position, they have the power of the incumbency, they undoubtedly would get a caucus nomination if they so sought it.
Hopefully.
But that's only if we want to touch the charter, and I'm not sure. Again, unless I see more information about how often this happens and where this happens and what positions it happens in and how many times those positions go vacant. That's the...
But they don't go vacant because there's an appointment.
Yeah, but look how many people that
Non-election.
like
Well,
for
three people.
different committees that you have to draw out of retirement to sit because there's not enough. I mean, gee, when I joined the finance committee, how many people had you had on it for? 4?
We were short on the finance committee for quite a number of years. We're a committee of 7, and we operated as 5 for several years, and then we were 6. And
Those are appointments though, right? Those aren't
that's
elected.
appointed.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
Mark, what your thoughts on this?
How many votes are we talking about?
Currently 42.
Well, 10% of the people who came out for the election where the governor was elected.
So they can go up and down
The
So it
same
could be
number you
50
need
or
to
it could be
get
30.
nominated.
to actually get nomination papers.
Right. And that's the same number to get nomination, to get on the ballot?
Yes.
If you're not nominated to the caucus,
Right.
you need to get 42 votes, 42 signatures.
Currently 42.
Currently 42.
Right. So I guess there's 2 questions. One would be whether this should be on the charter or not, and then the other would be the language of this.
Yep.
I would reference, if we were to put something in the charter, I would reference the bylaw.
Yep.
To say what the exact count would be.
Yeah. Do you support the concept?
How many votes do you need to get on the ballot via the caucus?
2. 1.
Well, the majority of
The majority.
votes.
If there's nobody...
Depending on how many people go to the caucus.
If there's nobody,
Right. Yeah,
there's
right.
nobody running, if you're the only one nominated, the chair casts 1 vote for you as a
Right.
result of
Right.
the committee.
Right.
So it's effectively the vote of the people there.
One can nominate oneself.
And get on the ballot on the basis of that single vote.
Correct.
I mean, that's the baseline, that's the current baseline in my view. Why are we trying to move the needle?
Bob, in chewing on this, I guess there's a philosophical issue that I'm having, which is that creating, we want to create as much access for people to get up to be a part of government as possible. And sometimes that means that it doesn't work as well as we want it to, because that's how government is. It's a group of people trying to do their best. And sometimes, you get funny things like somebody getting elected by 3 votes, or 2 votes, or 1 vote. If they would shut up at the caucus, maybe 5 people, their friends and families voted for them in the general election. So that's the one piece, which is that I'm having trouble with creating any barrier. So that's, and again, this is not a final vote, I'm just talking my way through this. And the second thing is, as you said, there are things that we think were important to do and that we can clearly explain. I'm not sure that this is one of those.
And I think there's also ways to get somebody off if they're not doing it. All right, so you've got somebody not showing up, like they didn't really want to be there. So they didn't have...
So what are those ways?
Tell her if they're elected,
If they're
then if they're
elected,
appointed.
the only way to remove them would be
There's a
by
recall. Yeah, just...
And I have a question too, and it's more of a question than a comment. Why are we saying you're a better candidate if you went through the caucus? That's one way to get on a ballot. And I don't know why we would say that that is a better way or a worse way. And in terms of...
It takes some effort. It takes some effort.
Let me complete my thought. And thinking of a write-in does take a lot of effort also. And just speaking from experience, it wasn't a choice to circumvent a variety of rules. It was a decision that I woke up and made one day based on something that happened after all the other deadlines were met. If I could have had a time machine, I would have done everything I could have to go to the caucus or to pull my papers. I mean, I, in a few days, got 140 signatures for the article. I would have happily gone out and gotten 40 or so to be on that ballot, because on that ballot would have been a better opportunity for me, and it was a timeline of events for me, and the write-in was my pathway in. It wasn't to circumvent rules or to be, you know, tricky. So I just think pathways should remain open for people as part of the process, and there'll be any number of reasons that people will choose a path. And I wish I was at that. I was at that caucus, and I was mulling things over in my mind, and so it's like...
But you would have gotten more than 42 votes. You know, you worked at it. I'm
just saying, I don't know why we would restrict people's opportunity to participate, which is, I think, a lot of what you said, is maintaining those pathways in and then letting democracy play out. In these scenarios, if somebody doesn't get elected by these finicky rules, it defaults to an appointment, and they're an elected position. So I think I would want to see an elected position as much as possible be with the people electing the elected people, then for it to switch to an appointment feels, where's the advantage there?
So Jamie, do you have one more comment? Or?
Yeah, I do. I think if you run a write-in and you put the work into it like you did, Ms. Adams, I think you're going to get more than 48 votes. Clearly, you got hundreds. I think if hundreds of people go to the polls and only 3 votes get cast for somebody, that's not any kind of mandate to me at all.
But does voting have to be a mandate?
Yeah, and I don't want to penalize one path over another. It's like you're prioritizing...
Yeah, I think it's a mistake. I don't think mandate's probably too strong a word. But I mean, I think 3 votes out of 400 people go.
So what I'd like to do is call for a vote of who wants to continue considering this proposal with the language possibly will maybe change. So it's yes, we should continue leaving this on our agenda, or no, we're done with it for now and that'll come up another time. So those who think we should continue discussing this as part of the charter process. Those opposed?
I have to record who was in favor.
Jamie and Mike.
Well, thanks for listening.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, my vote is to talk.
Not to support it.
Yep. No, that's what I wanted to do, is that if we know that there's not enough support for something, let's not spend the energy on it and try to make it perfect at that point if it's not going to happen. Because at one time I was on a committee that I didn't support what they were doing, but I said, I'm going to work with you to make sure that what you do is the best possible product in case it gets voted. So that's what we will always do, is come with the best product. So back to the process at whole. Thank you all for all the work that you've done so far on this, because I was dreading coming up with the first draft, but the notes that Mark had, that Michael's been taking, the comments that people have made, I felt like I got most of it. And then what I did is, as I said in the email, Ware, Palmer, and Athol have some pretty good charters and pretty good language, so that if there was something that we talked about doing, I tried to pull that language. Nothing I put on here is I'm going to be supporting to the death. I put it out here for discussions. Wherever possible, try to get the best language. Sometimes I just put something in there in order for us to actually have something to react to. I have since sent it to the town manager, who's come back with some language questions for what's the intent of various things, and she's going to be talking to Labor Council for some of the things that I'll talk about, supervision of employees. I sent it to town council, not for the full review, but just for a quick pass. He just sent something this evening. I haven't had a chance to review his comments. So we can just dive right in. And I think if we go by second...
Just as a point of order, we passed over the public comment section of the agenda.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Is there public comment from the public? Okay, great. Do minutes, we don't have any minutes to approve,
They're right next to you.
but they weren't sent out to everybody, so we'll hold off until the next meeting. I always want people to have a chance to read through them. Any other feedback from any town committees or departments?
I meet with the Board of Health on Monday, and I think that's germane because we have language where we've tried to be consistent in a number of places, but there's no language regarding the Board of Health. So that's going to be my main discussion point with them, whether or not that's appropriate. But I think we have the language, we just need to copy it into that section if we decide that's the way we want to go.
Okay, when we get to that, we can talk about that. Terry gave me the written surveys that we have, and I'm going to talk to Elaine about the Survey Monkey results. I don't have anything on that at the moment. The four different sections, non-substantive changes, and that's my opinion, they're non-substantive. You get to challenge me on saying, well, that really does change something by adding that comma. Clarifying changes, and then major changes we talked about, select board versus selectmen, and appointed versus elected town clerk. And then there's 3 proposed election type changes. We talked about the first one, minimum numbers for write-ins. The other proposal was term limits and ranked choice voting. But I propose that we sort of try to capture all 3 except for the major changes. I want to have separate discussions on the select board and town clerk. So we just go through the first. So a real minor change on section 1.2 short title is actually putting quotation marks around Lunenburg Home Rule Charter because it's cited as. That's an English thing. On page 3, quorum, to clarify what the Attorney General's office has said is a quorum is a majority of the entire authorized complement. So it's not just members in office at that time. Then the letter M, the bulletin board at town hall instead of in town hall because we actually have one outside, and maybe inside or outside to allow us flexibility. Article 2, legislative branch. 2.3 committees, section B, finance committee. We had stated, I believe we had felt that it was important that the finance committee be residents who are registered to vote.
Is that something we need to vote on? Because I think that's a clarification that may represent a change. Didn't we have a question around Mark Lucia?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was the question town resident or was the question citizen?
It's registered to vote.
Registered to vote.
Registered to vote, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be it, okay. Town residents registered. Okay.
So I would say when we get to these different sections, let's take a vote and be clear on these things.
So is he registered to vote?
Not yet, but he's hoping to be by the time the charter.
So the other thing that there's a section at the far end that says anybody currently in any position will remain in that position until their term ends, regardless of what goes on in the charter.
And the other question too was, and not to belabor this particular issue, was that you said that sometimes there are people who are not registered to vote.
Be for religious reasons or philosophical reasons.
Right. So, but that's okay. We want to preclude them from being on the finance committee.
So part of the way this came up is that when you go to town meeting and you ask for the vote of the finance committee will take a vote, but that one person will not be able to vote in the vote at town meeting. They can vote as a committee member, but they can't vote as a member of town meeting because they're not registered to vote.
Right.
So
Why are we doing this? What was the purpose?
It's not stated in there that somebody needs to be,
And why do we want to state it that they have to be a registered voter?
to identify that they have to be a citizen,
no,
a U.S. citizen.
No, it wasn't because they were citizens that we felt that they should be registered to vote to be participating in town government.
Oh, okay.
So that's what different
You can't
people...
vote at town meeting unless you're registered to vote.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can't make a recommendation? Well,
And this is also going to, you'd be authorized to speak at town meeting as a visitor at that point.
Right.
The town moderator would recognize that person.
okay.
We usually even sit them in a different area.
Right.
Because you're not, so that would become.
So they wouldn't be
like
counted.
confusing.
This is also going to come out later because we also talked about, well, if it's true for the Finance Committee, it should be true for all committees. And this is one comment that the town manager raised was, are you going to preclude some people who you may want to have some committees that may not necessarily need to be registered to vote? And in fact, when we talked about the citizen part was that they lived in Lunenburg. Because there's nothing that says, except for elected officials, that they couldn't be appointed, in the old days when we had appointed Board of Health, you'd appoint a doctor, and that doctor could live in Fitchburg, because that's where all the doctors were at that time. That may have been the case. So the question becomes, do we want to have appointed members registered to vote? And would that be an issue?
I think that's an important criterion. You want to participate, register to vote. You have a vote. You have a say.
And thinking specifically about the Finance Committee, it's really a unique organ of the town. It's unlike any other committee. And, it is an appointed committee, yet it has this important voice at town meeting that requires it from time to time to take votes. So I would agree with you that being registered to vote means you can actually do your job at town meeting.
Not to diminish the role of the Finance Committee, but it's not as strong as it was prior to the current charter.
No, I understand that the changes that have happened, but for instance, the school committee is another unique organ because it's independent in its own. It has
Right.
And since it's elected, you have to be registered.
And just going back to the religious part, the people who would not be registered to vote will not be participating in town government for the same reason they're not registered to vote.
Oh, okay, so they wouldn't participate in it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Makes sense.
Okay.
So anybody not support this? Okay, we'll stay in for now. And as I said before, your votes tonight, you can change your mind later, but this is the preliminary part.
As we go through this, it'd be easier for those purposes if we can just say the numbers and letters that we're working on.
Okay.
With page 5.
Yeah, we're in 2.2-4, right? For the next one.
2-3B.
B, Finance Committee.
Finance Committee.
So 2-4, time of meeting. Good.
I just want to say the second meeting wasn't going to be a special time meeting, it's going to be a second time.
Okay, so we were talking about stating that we're going to have there shall be maybe a second.
You can take annual out.
Don't take special out.
I think we should be special out.
So we have the
I
annual.
agree with you, you could take annual out too, because it's 2 a year. But it's not special anymore.
The grammar's a little...
But it's not special anymore.
So we could say the first annual town meeting on the first line, and then the second annual town meeting.
Works for me.
Because I think the words annual town meeting are a term of art,
Yeah.
they mean something.
Yeah. So the concept that there shall be a second annual town meeting held in October or November on a date and time fixed by bylaw.
Yep.
Part of the reason you do it by bylaw is that's more easily changed than the charter. What I'm going to propose going forward is that anybody can raise instead of asking for each thing, raise an objection if you don't want to keep it in.
Like a whole.
Right, a whole. 2.7, initiation of warrant articles. This is a recommendation of the town manager that proposed warrant articles need to go to Finance Committee and posted instead of. So the concept is to cause a written copy to be provided to the chairperson of the Finance Committee instead of mailed. It could be mailed, it could be done by email.
Would you have to say written or electronic? Because I don't know if you can apart what written means. Because
So
I
that's
just
the
wrote an
question.
or electronic copy, depending upon how you would define it. It's just not sure.
I got it.
Yep.
Because some people might be like, well, that's not written.
Yeah. Next section is 2.10, rules of procedure. Recommendation from town moderator, and I pulled this language from another town, the conduct of town meetings shall be governed by the latest version of town meeting time and such other rules and procedures, plural, that town meeting may by bylaw establish from time to time. So the town meeting always has the ability to do its rules, but this basically says it's here.
So just clean up those words, or I guess just remove the "and."
May establish from time to time. That was why I was stumbling. Thank you. Elected officials. We'll come back to selectmen or select board. So 3.2 subsection D, appointments, moving over on to page 14. This is where the next discussion, appointments to committees shall be town residents who are registered to vote. So that would be for all other, this currently is town committees by the selectmen. We may have to come back that for the moderator too.
Are we going through just red or red and purple?
We're doing both. We're going to be doing both. So right now the question is, are people okay with appointments to committees shall be town residents who are registered to vote?
On page 13, we jumped over some purple.
Oh, we did. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
yep, appointments. And this is a purple because it's a change that we hadn't decided on, was whether the town accountant should be appointed by the Board of Selectmen solely. I put it in under the town manager appoints and the town selectmen ratify. And to just let you know what ratify means is that the selectmen don't get to tell the manager who to appoint. They could just keep saying no, no, no until they bring somebody that they want. So,
And had you said that this was divided up maybe on purpose to balance who was appointing people to a similar place?
that's what one side can do. There's not a requirement that it be done that way because the various towns are appointed, other towns appoint this way. So it's not legally required.
So do you know why they had it separated?
Probably because there used to be a capo.
Now, the town treasurer, collector, clerk used to be elected, and there was a town auditor. The town treasurer was the accountant, and the auditor was the check on that position. The town then made treasurer, collector separate from town accountant, and had the town accountant appointed by the selectmen, and then we had the charter that the treasurer, collector were still elected. Then the charter made the treasurer, collector appointed, which they then kept the same person in that for a while, and they had the town accountant continue to be appointed by the selectmen. So from the start, when they came up with the town accountant position, it was appointed by the selectmen, so I don't think they made a change. Whether it was a conscious decision to keep it that way or not, I don't know. So it was a carryover. I changed my opinion on this. I feel that with the selectmen ratifying the position, they're looking to the town manager to find a qualified person that the selectmen can then verify.
Well, I also think that later on, you've got that this person is technically supervised by the person who's the finance director, who is supervised by the town manager. So it really kind of makes sense. So, because they have direct day-to-day operating responsibilities as opposed to everybody else on this list, I think, as I read it.
And what's really interesting is looking at some of the charters, the selectmen only appoint 4 or 5 positions, and everything's appointed, and you don't have very many elected officials. We're not proposing that in this charter. What this effectively says, and what this very language is saying, any major department head is going to be appointed by the town manager, ratified by the selectmen. So you still have an elected official board overseeing that appointment, but they don't actually make it. They let the town manager find the most qualified person.
in here you have, I know it's in purple, but town clerk.
We're going to come back to
It's
that.
in
We're going to come back.
purple,
That's
highlighted yellow.
That's going to come back based on what, that's going to come back based,
Special.
that's right, that's going to come back based on what we decide on that part, so.
All right.
So, does anyone not support moving town accountant to appointment by the town manager?
I guess I'm not so clear on. What I worry about is I think that our current town manager is excellent, but I guess what I'm concerned about is if we have another town manager who maybe isn't as excellent, does this create an opportunity for conflict?
And in that case, the Board of Selectmen should be firing the town manager.
Correct. However, I mean, I think Katie and I, we went to school around the same time, and we had the experience with the superintendent at that time, who was in place for a very long time, and, you know, sometimes when you're getting the work done to remove someone, it may take a while, which creates an opportunity for a lot more wrong to get done. So, even if that is the case, I guess I'm concerned that.
So here I'll ask the question, and I'll talk out of school here on TV. When we were renegotiating the contract with the town accountant, which I've done twice since I've been on the board, because 3-year terms, we don't really supervise the town accountant. The fact is, this board of selectmen, as it's turned into more of a policymaker, really doesn't have the ability to go in and say, are you really overseeing things correctly? That's really what, and this is an appropriate time to discuss it, that's really what the charter has done, is to create a chief person who's going to be running this town, and that's the town manager. And we better pick the best town manager and have a process by which we just did an evaluation. And in fact, we're creating a dual evaluation discussion as far as making sure that we have a process that we're regularly in touch with that process. That's got to be the way to do it, as opposed to trying to reach down into a particular department to watch that.
And I guess this is something that I've wanted to say about some of the other discussions about what we should do at certain positions. I've always seen a difference between, you know, a policy-making body and a policy-making elected official versus a ministerial position, you know, a bureaucratic position. Do they act independently in a way that requires them to face the voters? And I'm not sure that the town accountant meets that criteria. And it's more of a part of town government job, if you will, and that should have strong oversight by a professional, in this case a good town manager. So that would be why I would think that we would do that. You know, when you have, you know, you talked about the past bad experience with the previous superintendent, and one of the things that happened was the board that was responsible for that was the one that came up with, oh, we've got to create systems to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And because there was a policy-making board on top of a appointed position, which was the superintendent.
Any comments from either people on the Finance Committee?
No, I think that basically, I would support having the town manager be the person who's making that appointment, because they do work very closely together in terms of the development oversight. And I think the other thing to me that's important is the accountant doesn't have the money. It's like the treasurer does, but the treasurer is appointed by the town manager as well. So.
Yeah, and I think that's really the point here. Is there proper segregation of duties if it's appointed by the town manager versus appointed by the selectmen? I know we're not calling the town manager the CEO, but that's kind of the way I view the position. And therefore, the town manager should appoint the town accountant.
Right, and since the Board of Selectmen is still ratifying it, then...
Right, and the check and balance is the warrant that they sign every week before any check is issued.
Right.
There's an opportunity to check the details. I know we don't often do that, but there's
We have
the
the ability
opportunity.
to, right?
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is a side trip on that one. There is one town that has, and we can do this, one town that's actually directed that the town manager signs the warrant. Unless the town manager is not available, then the chair of the selectmen sign it. We have the opportunity under state law to designate one of the Board of Selectmen to be authorized to sign it instead of having all five or the majority of it, that type of thing. We've not chosen to do that. But I am going to highlight the fact, both for our report and perhaps the need for policies regarding segregation of duties. That's one of the things the auditors have talked about. Make sure we have more of those things. And for instance, Karen currently comes in to the selectmen and does a report on a quarterly basis on the financials. So that's sort of an interim check of things like that. And if they didn't show up, okay, there's something going on here, we may need to ask a question. The second one in that paragraph is moving the Director of Council on Aging to be another department head appointed by the town manager.
It just seems to make sense. I do it on, all right, and that's also ratified by the Board of Selectmen, not the Council on Aging.
Yeah.
So that one, is there a reason why that one's not ratified by the Council on Aging?
The only committees that are ratified are Planning Board and Sewer, because they're elected policymaking, dealing with their person running for
And
them.
that's different than Council on, okay.
It could be the same, but it's the theory was it was policy elected as opposed to the appointed because...
Yep.
Okay. Thank you for catching that, Katie. So page 14, appointments to committees shall be town residents who are registered to vote.
Sounds good.
So the selectmen also, where do they have that? So this is clarifying that the town treasurer, town collector, town accountant, director of municipal finance, which comes later, will come back to town clerk, director of facilities, I put in there in the event there is a director of facilities, council on aging director, and animal control officer. And changing the building inspector to building commissioner, although we have, I looked on the website, we have a building commissioner and we have a building inspector, so I still have a question whether we're only, I think if we're looking at department heads, it should be the commissioner, and the inspector should go to the town manager by the normal process.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Who's the commissioner?
Gary Rhodes is the commissioner.
Okay.
It used to be called the zoning enforcement officer, the building inspector. Now it's when the previous town manager reorganized, it changed the position to building commissioner. And then wherever the word said affirm, we agreed that we wanted to change it to ratify. That's because that's what we've been doing. School committee 3-3, subsection B1. We had an issue with the elect a superintendent, and I believe that it was probably an S missing, so therefore it should be select a superintendent. Although technically you may be electing, but not in the caucus nomination paper route. So. Next section is 3.5 on page 16, cemetery commissioner powers and duty. The cemetery commissioner is asked to have the word sole responsibility put before responsibility to make regulations. I don't think that changes the intent of this at all because nobody else is going to be making regulations regarding the cemetery. And then the language in purple is language that is drawn from the Board of Selectmen section. So this is not new language in the charter. The language being provided, however, that nothing in this section shall be construed to authorize any member of the commissioners nor a majority of such members to become involved in the day-to-day administration of the commission. The intention of this provision that the commissioners shall act only through the adoption of broad policy guidelines that are to be implemented by officers employed serving under it. As somebody once said, heads in, hands off.
I'm sorry, I just realized it was high hole.
That's good, that's good. So Board of Health, as Mark was talking about earlier, that's another elected board that is policy-making, similar to sewer, cemetery, and park. And this does not have the language that might be there. They don't have a person that's as high up as sewer or planning.
It doesn't raise to the level of business manager,
That's correct.
but it is, I think the position actually reports to the land use director.
Not clear that that's true. I don't know if that got reorganized in there. I'm not sure the Board of Health was part of there. I know that Zoning Board of Appeals, Building do, but I don't believe Board of Health does. So I think your discussion with the Board of Health will be good. To have that discussion. I think part of the theory is that there are some extraordinary things that the Board of Health has powers to do that may not be appropriate to transfer to somebody else, but the question becomes the day-to-day work of the Board of Health. They do approve various things, so the question becomes, what is, as is true of the other ones, what would be day-to-day? Would we move that?
I was thinking as much about the supervision of the individual.
So hold that.
An elected board is not going to do a performance evaluation.
So hold that thought till we get to town manager, because I attempted to add some language there that I may have gone too far.
Okay.
But we'll come back to that. Library trustees. I got this from the email from the library trustees, but I'm not sure if I captured the final version. Town manager raised some of the question within the last sentence of that, within the limits established by municipal policy, collective bargaining agreements, and town personnel bylaws, the library director will hire employees, fix their salaries, define their duties, make rules concerning their tenure of office. The town manager raised that would be in contradiction to the collective bargaining process. So on that section, she is going to be working with Labor Council to come up with some alternative language. She wasn't opposed to the intent of that, which is basically the Board of Library Trustees hire the library director, and the library director supervises these employees. But there's a lot of things that actually are subject to the town's personnel management system, which really should be centralized with the town manager, as it is currently. Did anyone have any... Some of the language was rewritten slightly.
As I read through it, it didn't sound to me like they changed the gist of it, and I was just wondering why they felt such a significant rewrite was necessary. It didn't look to me like they added a lot of value.
It was just a language issue.
I think some of it goes to, when I was writing the library director part versus the current one says to appoint a library service who's charged of the day-to-day administration, subject policy directors and other trustees. And the other one actually was more like a job description, which if you read different town charters, the charters tend to be simpler unless you get to a really wordy community. And then the wordy community has everything in there. This tends to expand it. I don't think it hurts. The only thing is that if you have it here and you don't have it in another department, should we be doing that? So I guess what I'll say is that, does anyone have any problem with any of the language within it? And then we'll go back to them about, can we simplify it to make it more consistent with the other departments?
I thought they had simplified.
Oh, okay. So they went from the encyclopedia down to the Cliff Notes. Okay. Well, if there's-
Well, I think it was, just to basically, just to isolate the duties of the director from the committee, so that it was, they're taking back policy and oversight, and giving all of the operations to the library
Is-
director.
Has the library director had input into this?
She wrote it
Okay.
with the board of trustees. She was, yeah.
And they have a very good relationship in those meetings.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, we'll come back with language at the end, and working out with the library and the town manager on that. Town moderator, park commission, so park commissioners, 3.9, adding in the same language that we added to the cemetery commissioners,
Yep.
heads in, hands off. Planning Board, 3-10, C appointments. We added in, so that the concept, of the land use director versus the planning director, there needs to be more work on this, because the land use director oversees the zoning board of appeals and building inspector, but that's not under the jurisdiction of the planning board. So we may go back to planning director and leave all this language here, and then add another section to say the land use director is overseeing the various things, so that for the land use director duties that are not planning board related, you'd have a different path to the town manager than this one. So, and that you go back to the planning board for issues with the land use, with the planning director, not with the land use director. So that part, there needs to be more work. The other thing the town manager raised, as Mark alluded to, is that I added the words "in consultation with the planning board" regarding supervision. She raised the issue is that if you, and this is nothing about any candidate on any of these positions, I want to make sure, but if you had a candidate where you had a personnel issue, trying to deal with a board, a 5-member elected board, to deal with an interim personnel issue in a public meeting format could be difficult. But we don't want, I want to make sure there's communication back and forth. And that's why I use the word consultation. It doesn't necessarily mean approval. But this is wording that she's going to go back to the Labor Council to make sure that we get it appropriately there, so everybody understands. Well, you didn't consult me versus I didn't approve it. We want to avoid those issues by adding clarifying language. We don't want to muddy the waters.
I would just add an "and"
Where?
in the last sentence on page 21.
And
And zoning board.
Yeah. Thank you. Conservation of Development. We'll come back to town clerk. 13.14 Board of Sewer Commissioners, adding in the same language, clarifying language about the heads in, hands off.
Are you on page 23?
Yes.
In your green, it says, in the event the position becomes elected, but that would be appointed. I mean, it's just more notes, but just...
Thank you. We'll come back to that.
I love how we're going to come back to this.
No, this is important. You
That was
remember.
so funny. Let's not talk about that.
Page 24, appointments. The same discussion regarding the consultation with the sewer commissioner regarding supervision of the business manager, making it clear that the town manager would be the supervisor, and we want to make sure that this language is consistent with what Labor Council would need to do. And for the public, we're basically looking at town manager responsible for the supervision, evaluation, and all personnel actions, so that make sure that this follows collective bargaining agreements, which require evaluations, as well as the town. If it's not in there now, it will probably be in the salary administration plan. So, town manager, the appointment process, page 25, 4.1. Sorry.
Hold for our secretary for a second. Section 312. It's like...
No, that's good, because if it's not in the minutes, it didn't happen.
We want to get to the ending.
That's right, that's right. What did we say? So the town moderator suggested that the current town manager search committee is a member of the Board of Selectmen, a member of the school committee, a member of the planning board, a member of the finance committee, and the town moderator. He stated they're all elected officials. They represent the town, but they're not have a citizen at large. So he proposed adding another member. I raised the issue of you now have, if you do that, you now have an even member, which could create a tie. Well, create a tie, a vote means it fails. So that could be managed, because the concern was if you added two people, you're going to make a large committee even larger and more difficult. So I did one member of the public appointed by the town moderator. Should that member be a registered voter?
Now we're on 4-1.
Should it say a resident?
I'm seeing 6 now.
Plus the town moderator.
I'm counting the town.
It is
That's 6.
So it's 6 now, with this added position. Right now, it's 5.
Well, why would you make, oh, okay, so the one added position was the one that he added.
Right.
Right, and the question is, should it be a registered voter?
Instead of member of the
Instead of member of the
public, you say
public.
resident of the town. So
Well, you could just say one registered voter.
Appointed by the...
Here's where I'm back to, the ticket in is, you have the ability to vote on these things.
I agree. It should be a registered voter.
You have to have the ability to actually vote on it.
Okay?
All right, we will add that in.
Yeah, I mean, instead of saying one member of the public, you could just say one registered voter.
One resident, registered voter.
Mhm.
Non-elected registered voter.
Right.
Okay. Then we go to town manager powers and duties 4-2.
Actually, I'm sorry, did you want that to be, you want that to be a member at large, so not a member of any other committee?
Yeah, that's remember that's how, yeah.
Not a member of any other committee.
You talking about the
member.
appointment committee?
The
Yeah.
member of the public appointed by the town moderator.
The theory being here is that you want somebody that's not an insider. An insider is the elected and all the appointed officials. Some of the people are not really going to be really insiders, but there's at least 1 out of 6 that you got to get from outside.
I spent 10 years as an outsider, so I don't know what that means.
And then eventually you pull them in and you get them appointed to something, including people who attend meetings such as this, who will eventually get appointed to something, which is good. All right. 4.2, powers and duties.
I got one before you get there.
Yep.
Got it fixed up. Town manager need not be a resident of the town. The town manager shall not have served in an elective or appointed office in town government. I just want to suggest that we might want to clarify that as Lunenburg town government, because do we really care if we got a real good candidate who was on town government in some other town?
Which paragraph is that?
In fact, we hired our town manager from another town.
That's right.
Right.
Oh, yes, all right, so page 26. Shall not have served an elected or...
Again, I don't have numbers on that.
Oh, it says, all right,
So
so
we cite the...
4-1.
It's 4-1, beginning with the town manager need not be resident.
4th paragraph.
Got it.
So I think the theory is of the town, and then it says in the town government. I think...
I just suggest we say the town manager shall not have served in an elective or appointed office in Lunenburg town government.
Yep, that's clarified. Yep.
Okay.
There's some towns that have 24 months. Good catch. So 4-2, powers and duties, subsection C. So this is where it wasn't in the selectmen's part, but originally it was in the town managers where the town manager would recommend the positions of treasurer and collector, but it wasn't a ratification. It was, the town manager found it and sent it to us. Now I'm actually proposing that those actually be really appointed and then ratified, so it's clarifying that. So this repeats the same language that is in the selectmen exactly here. Further down under subsection D, I added the words to where it says to appoint in appropriate circumstances to remove, I added the words evaluate and supervise, subject to provisions of the town personnel bylaws, civil service law, and any collective bargaining agreements. All department heads, officers, members of boards and commissioners for whom no other method of selection is provided by charter. It's basically saying town manager appoints and is going to be supervising these people, going to be evaluating these people, and could be removing these people. So you give power to appoint, you have to give power to remove. And part of that power in between is you want to evaluate and supervise. The selectmen have been working to make sure the collective bargaining agreements have evaluation process. The salary administration part should do that. It's not necessarily tied to compensation, but it's important that employees and people that are appointed get feedback on their performance. Okay?
Yep. I have a general question, it's not something so specific. But when we propose this, I'm already seeing that the role of the town manager is being strengthened through this, which then means that probably her pay will be increased. Is that something that is going to be evaluated by the Finance Committee?
I don't think we're necessarily looking to change the responsibilities so much as to acknowledge them through this charter. So it sounds like they're being strengthened, but in reality, we're just reflecting what is, not trying to change it.
And the reality is that we've had many times when the town manager should have been able to do something, and because it wasn't clear, previous ones chose not to. We haven't gone as far, if we were saying they were going to appoint all these positions without ratifying, I'd say, okay, you're really responsible for everything now. I think this is going to give tools to be more efficient as opposed to additional duties.
Okay, and then
In
just,
some ways, it makes the town manager's job easier, because there is clarification.
right,
So should we decrease pay?
Clawback.
Do you want to see the Finance Committee?
I shouldn't say that, more efficient.
and I don't know if this belongs anywhere, but I also just wonder about the appointment of, say, for example, the Director of IT. Is he in there somewhere?
We talked about that. This
Joint appointment?
It's not in here.
I'm just wondering, because it's a joint appointment between the town and the schools. Or should it be, because they're showing up
I
on
don't
the
know
budgets?
that there's anything that
So it's not in the bylaw, and it's not in any policy, so it must be procedure that custom.
Yeah, I think it's custom. I don't think that it just says a written
And I didn't even know that.
directive.
Well, I just don't know how the decision is made in terms of hiring and whether it was that the town manager...
Because it's a shared position,
Because I think there used to be two positions.
because it's a shared position, that's how that...
But we talked about that when we talked about the facilities manager. Do we have to call out every position that we have in the town? I think the answer is no.
No.
But if there's a position or a body that is governed by state law, we have an opportunity to clarify that with town law.
Okay, so we're only dealing with state law positions when we list all of the positions.
Well, as a starting point.
And I think that the theory was these were department heads.
Right.
Now, IT when it's a department of one? Should it be there? I mean, we could clarify saying to, but I don't think the selectmen need to ratify the director of IT.
No, that's fine, and if it's, whether it's someplace else or not. To me, I was just curious, who is responsible for him?
And maybe that's a good way to look at
It's
it.
a joint responsibility, and everybody works together on that.
Okay.
It's one of these, it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
But by this language, it reports to the town manager because it says if it's not called out anyplace else, that's where it reports.
That's
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then paragraph E is the section I talked about before as far as supervising employees. To be the personnel administration who is entrusted with the administration of the town personnel system. That was proposed by the town manager. And the last sentence says, and to prepare and keep a plan establishing personnel staffing requirements for each agency. So all of this paragraph was going to cover the entire town except for the school department. So, and that's when the town manager said, so I'm going to be supervising everybody? Okay, well, I wasn't trying to get to that point, but I was trying to get to the point where the town manager is responsible that every employee is supervised. And so she shouldn't be supervising the police chief's clerk. The police chief should be, but she should be responsible to make sure that the police chief is doing that. So this paragraph is going to have more clarification from Labor Council on that. Subsection I, now this is when we talked about, and I added an additional word from another community, to have full jurisdiction over the rental, use, cross out the word and, maintenance and repair of all town facilities and property except for property under the control of the school committee, the library trustees, and the conservation commission.
And the cemetery. Because they have the
Well,
sole responsibility.
no, that's sole responsibility to create regulations.
Oh, okay.
But the
Town manager will
Yeah.
oversee it.
then J.
Can I ask a question about
Sure.
that? A lot of times, when there's like a fair or an event, somebody will come and ask the selectmen's permission.
So this would now be,
But it really seems that they would only have to ask the town manager permission.
yeah,
And then would there be a situation, and I was trying to think through it, but just out of curiosity, where that's a huge amount of control, like if this playground's being used by this, could it just be chosen to be something else? Like, I was thinking if there's no definition on what is what, and could she just make a decision that something becomes something different? And in this language, yes. And I just started playing it out and it got awkward.
Do you mean an example of what you mean?
Well, it says he or she has full, or they would have full jurisdiction over basically any use or rental of a space. So maybe there's a field and then she could decide the town's going to rent this. And then who would be able to say no? No, we don't want to rent that field. And I mean, you could play through thousands of scenarios and it started to feel like a strange...
so right now, that's the existing statute. It says over the rental and use of all town facilities. So it's already under the town manager's duties. If it got to that point, I think it goes back to what Michael raised as far as the town accountant, then the selectman should be stepping in and
Whoa.
saying, you've gone too far. Because I think that's part of the process, is that, okay, if the land is given to the town for municipal purposes, okay, the town has broad discretion on that. If the land is given to the town for park purposes, okay, you're really going to have a hard time switching that over and renting that to somebody else unless you're going to, it could be controversial. You're going to privatize a park? I don't think we should, but theoretically you could under this. Rental of the T.C. Passio's kitchen is under the jurisdiction of the town manager, not the selectman.
And so when people come to you, like they just did with the fair for June 6th, it's sort of ceremonial, but who are they actually, and what are they actually seeking then?
So they're coming to us because they actually were going to close Memorial Drive, and the selectmen were road commissioners, and so therefore
Okay.
we have to give that permission. The land upon which it is really should be upon the manager. Good point.
To look at it another way, I'll use the example of the school committee. The school committee makes policy on how the buildings are used. And we have a chart on, what we charge for who and why and for different kinds of settings in what group. And so there's a whole set of policies that we have in place. If you want to use a school facility, you call Mr. Londa. And Mr. Londa arranges it as long as it's within the policy.
And by extension, any elected board can set policy.
But that's different.
No. 'cause
No,
they
not
could-
from that. I'm thinking back to his original thought that you said the school committee oversees John Londa, but you don't oversee...
No, we don't
Heather.
oversee John Londa, we oversee the superintendent.
No, I was just trapped in a thought, but I think I lost it. But
Okay.
there was a slightly different scenario there where the school committee was involved in how the school's used, whereas who's involved in how anything in town is used? Who defines what?
But what I was saying is the elected bodies can set policy, so the park commission can set policy, any other elected body that has anything to do with land can set policy, and then the town manager has jurisdiction over its use, but follows those policies.
Correct. I guess that's my...
Should it say in there
You
by
captured my point.
policy?
Correct, subject to policies.
That's what it would be.
So, for instance, going back to the cemetery commissioner, the superintendent would be overseeing the maintenance and repair of the cemetery, subject to the cemetery commissioner's rules and regulations. So we may need to add some of that language on top.
I'm following you on this one as well, Katie, and I'm wondering if we should revisit the language of full jurisdiction and change that to manage or oversee or something else that is not as strongly worded as full jurisdiction.
So what would you be taking away?
What do you mean?
By eliminating the word jurisdiction, go to management. What things are you taking away?
I think that there is, I see Katie's point on this one, and I think that there is a concern that we are giving the town manager full jurisdiction. I mean,
She already has it.
yeah, I know that.
Do you want to
And-
take it away?
I think we should take it away.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's something that we really should be
So I'm going
doing.
to turn that over to you as a task to come up with
An
what you
alternative.
mean by that and what are the scenarios that we're trying to avoid.
All right.
Or I like what you said about adding in there just something by following the...
Subject to policies established by boards with
It just reads like
regulatory...
a balance, even if it
Right.
doesn't change anything,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
would read a little bit
Yeah.
different than
Yeah,
that person can do
and-
everything.
And
I don't
think
know,
about it
it's
that
read
way, is that if that's the case, full jurisdiction is subject to, and we'll have to talk to the town manager to see about that, so...
But is it really full jurisdiction if it's subject to?
Take out the word full. To have jurisdiction subject to policy over rental use, maintenance, or repair.
Full is kind of an unnecessary word in the phrase anyway.
Jurisdiction subject to policy.
Okay.
I can support that. You just don't want to look at it.
Unless you want to...
I do want, oh my God, the sky is falling scenarios, because what we're trying to do is avoid those.
Yeah.
So if you could come up with things that we're trying to address here, I think, but I think maybe eliminating the word full, because they have jurisdiction, you have jurisdiction. Full really is redundant.
And in reality, if it becomes problematic, somebody's going to show up at a Board of Selectmen meeting, just as they show up at a school committee meeting and go, we got a problem.
Okay.
Was there a reason why they had full? I don't know if I'm that comfortable with it, we're just banging the word full.
Right?
Just, all of a sudden, was there a reason though? Was it getting into a situation where she didn't have, or whoever it was didn't have the power?
It probably was not joint jurisdiction. And so that's where, subject to policies, or, so part of the thing is, even if you have a policy, this doesn't mean that the committee that does a policy is going to have jurisdiction over it. We're still saying the town manager has jurisdiction.
And then jurisdiction means that she can create contracts and...
So,
It's also, it will avoid things like, there were cases in the past where, people on, rec committees had keys to fields and just kind of, made the decision to give the key to somebody. It wasn't a thought-out process of that.
Section J, English language for the following 5 fiscal years instead of the next ensuing. A little bit more comfortable wording. L, clarifying that it's not just contracts with town employees, but it's also bargaining units subject to ratification by the Board of Selectmen. That's another check. Some towns allow town managers to do contract negotiations regarding employees, and it doesn't come to the Selectmen. This one stays with the Selectmen. Subsection M, we took out the specific chapters of the general laws to allow us to be more flexible.
I'm sorry to make you go back.
No.
I'm just curious about something that's there already under K. And it says to assure that a full and complete inventory of all property of the town, both real and personal, is kept, including all property under the jurisdiction of the school committee. Is that true? Does the town manager do the inventory, including school?
Now, whether this is done or not, this is an aspirational part. I would dare say that similar to the town manager doesn't do the sewer commission day-to-day operation.
Well, that's my point.
So
Should it be just school, or should it be all?
To assure is kept.
To assure is kept, yeah. Yeah, so taking out
But that's the other side of my discussion.
Right.
Why does it say school?
Well, because the school is in charge of its property completely, and unless you actually pull them into this, they're on their own.
Okay, but is any other cemetery or
Now, the
park
school
or-
committee really is
Conservation.
called out separately for asking them to do something. Because the town has automatically, I believe,
Could it be about assets? I mean, the town manager overseeing assets, and even though she may not have direct management control of what goes on school property, but still, that still is an asset of the town.
It's really just saying she's assuring.
I just think it's, the fact that it says school committee seems odd. Why doesn't it say everybody or nobody?
It's saying everybody, including the schools, because
But are they the only exception? I mean,
in other
conservation has-
references,
Really?
in other references, we've called out the school,
So for instance...
nobody else.
And the opposite way is that we're saying that she's in charge of employees' personnel system except for the school department.
Okay.
So it's a term of art for the consumer.
Yeah, it's the independence that the school committee has from the Board of Selectmen.
And I also just want to, actually within L, I think basically this somewhat contradicts the library board of trustees role for the director of the library.
Yeah, coordinate with the library and things.
Because
Yeah, I think the library-
that person will set wages too.
Yeah. Okay. We'll do a little more work on that one.
Which one, Terry? I'm sorry.
Oh, where it says that it will negotiate all contracts involving the subject.
Yeah, and that's where the town manager said the employees of the library are subject to collective bargaining agreements already, so.
Right, but individual contracts that they might, yeah, I guess that's the...
That's why the library language has to change. Subsections S, we eliminated related to infrastructure maintenance, improvement, expansion. So it basically says to prepare and maintain long-term financial forecasts, including revenue expectations, future implications of operating budget, program decisions, and capital budget programs. The theory was we didn't want it just capital budget programs, just infrastructure maintenance and improvement expansion. We wanted to keep it broader.
Can we just actually go back to page 30?
Yep.
Is there a reason why we don't say Massachusetts general law up here?
Yep.
It's defined, right?
Is it defined on the first page?
Maybe.
General,
Yeah.
that where it says general law, general law?
F, page 2.
General laws and that's it.
Okay.
But then it should be, then E and F, yeah.
But it doesn't say Massachusetts.
Yeah, F does, general laws, the general laws of the Commonwealth.
Okay.
And then the capital C.
Yeah, you're right, thank you. Commonwealth. Okay.
I don't have in front of me, I'm looking at the chart, I guess the end of S, which is after the deletion and it says "and," for whatever reason, I'm blank.
Do you have T, section T?
I do.
Okay, so it's all those
Okay.
sections, and then it goes to T.
All right.
So this "and" is superfluous?
No, and it's sort of unrelated to S.
There's all these semicolons in there, so it's not a complete sentence.
Like S reads right into T.
EMT.
Yeah.
It's like a really, really long sentence.
It is, it's like 4 pages long.
Yep.
No
If the
difference.
hands over would hate it.
That's right.
My
So-
great English teacher.
4.5, removal and suspension, this relates to the town manager. I think this whole section needs a little more work. This is when I was getting tired when I was doing this part, because the town moderator recommended that we look at some of the things as far as the hearing process. I've got a question, I'll come back to that, and some of the notice requirements. So I did put in is that a request is going to be filed with the town clerk, who shall immediately notify the moderator. Instead of following with the moderator, filed with the town clerk. This is what he asked for. Some of the other town charters have more prescriptive timelines listed here for removal process. So I just want to make sure that this one's looked at again. I'm not asking for anything here. The one question I think we had a reaction to, the moderator proposed that the moderator be the hearing officer for the removal. And I think we were saying we didn't want to do that, but I wasn't clear on my notes.
My notes had 3 things he asked for that we didn't address. One is the right to call, the right to counsel, the right to call witnesses, and then the third one was the moderator presides.
So
I don't know if you want to deal with them now or...
So does anyone, I'm fine with all of those. On the town moderator presides does not take away the duty of the selectmen to decide. There may be a value to have the town moderator preside, so therefore all members of the selectmen can participate. Do you have comments, Jamie, on those 3 items?
Sorry, Jimmy, you said 3 things, I only got 2.
Okay, right to counsel,
Yep.
right to call witnesses,
Okay.
and the moderator presides. That was just directly from his, channeling Steve here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think those are all good. Does anybody not want to add those in? Okay. We'll get the language.
And your question to me, I kind of agree. It's as a selectman, I'd rather participate than preside.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
affects it, yeah.
Well, and it also gives, if you read various towns' stories of what's going on with their town government, the removal of the town manager or superintendent of schools or anything else like that is probably one of the most controversial things. Adding in the town moderator, not controlled by the selectmen, is a way to help diffuse it. It then allows the selectmen to be as vocal or not as vocal as they want to be without having to worry about procedure, because they don't have to run the meeting. So I think that's good, and I think it is an important enough position that you'd want to give them the right to counsel and the ability to call witnesses instead of, and that would avoid the charge of railroading through something being done. Okay. Next section is 5.3, Department of Finance and Financial Services. This, I believe, came from the town manager. There shall be Department of Finance and Financial Services hired by a director of municipal finance who is either the town manager or the town manager's appointee per Article 4, instead of saying who may be the town manager.
Can I go back?
Yep.
I don't want to interrupt that as the discussion on that one, because I'm back to bylaws A in 5.1. I don't quite understand that one.
Okay, so the town manager has the power, subject only to express prohibitions in the general law provisions of this charter. The town meeting may, by bylaw, reorganize, consolidate, create, merge, divide, or abolish any town agency in whole or in part, establish any new agency it deems necessary or advisable, determine the manner of selection, the term of office, prescribe the functions, provided, however, no function assigned by this charter to a particular town agency may be discontinued.
All right, so I
I
guess
think we
what I'm
need to
saying
take
is
out-
we have a whole charter here that kind of sets out town agencies and everything they do, and this is telling me that the town meeting can kind of reorganize that with 40 people.
Well, 50.
Okay.
Unless somebody doesn't call a quorum. So this starts out, the town manager and town meeting shall from time to time provide for the grouping of town agencies into convenient units. The organization of town into operating agencies for the provision of services and administration of the government may be accomplished through either of the methods that provide in this article. And the second part is what Carrie Spadell did with reorganizing the land use department, where she filed an administrative plan after consulting with the selectmen. We hold a hearing, becomes effective after 60 days. The town manager may reorganize, consolidate, abolish any town agency.
But it's also just, I mean, it has to be a bylaw vote brought to the town meeting.
So there's two ways. So the town manager has the same authority the town meeting does. You're right. It's town meeting could upend what's going on, but they can't do it if it's in this charter unless the charter allows it.
Right. So we talked about this hierarchy where the general laws are at the top of the hierarchy, and then the charter, and then the bylaws. This paragraph is saying that as long as you don't affect the charter or the general law, you can change everything else.
No, but it says prohibitions in the charter.
Subject to express prohibitions. So if this provision says that you will have a Board of Health that's elected, you can't undo that as a bylaw.
But then you have to go to the last sentence, and I think we've got to take out the word "or." However, no function assigned by this charter to a particular town agency may be discontinued, I think we take out the word "or," unless the charter specifically so provides, assigned to other town agency.
I think you just hand out an extra comma.
Yeah, I think the or is appropriate.
Or
Comma.
okay. So let's say...
No function assigned by this charter may be discontinued or reassigned.
Okay, so what function is assigned by bylaw but not by charter?
IT director.
Okay, so,
If you want to abolish that position, you can do so without affecting the charter.
Can you abolish the police department?
no.
No,
Because
it's in the charter.
Is it in the charter?
Yeah, there's a police...
Oh, that's right, we didn't get into it because we weren't changing it, right? And it's
There's
also-
some things like the fire department's more specifically called out in the charter
Yeah.
in different ways, but some departments like police are not.
Yeah.
Right.
That saves some money.
Katie Adams said.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand your concern is that similar to what we were talking about with the 42 votes, 50 people meeting the quorum at town meeting could do major damage to the town.
Or improvements.
Right, but I'm going to take, let's assume the worst case, the sky is falling. Somebody may think it's an improvement, that's why you've got 50 people voting. But since it's on a town warrant that's got mailed to every resident's home who is a registered voter, you're going to get more than 50 people out to oppose that change. And if you get 400 people out and they all vote for it, then it's an appropriate process. The assumption is that you don't want to give this power to change just to the town manager, you want to reserve it to the town meeting as well. We've not given it to the selectmen.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, we're recommending changes to town meeting.
Well, and I think the other thing is, this is why it's good to go through the charter the way we are, is that we are learning some things that we have a charter we should be living by, and it's like we haven't read it recently, so.
We review it every 10 years, but we should have to read it every month.
That's right.
I'm sorry, that one scared me.
No, I understand.
You think it should be cleaned up or something, that the language...
I don't know. I was surprised it was sitting there.
I don't know that this, you could take it out. Ultimately, the chief legislative body of the town is town meeting.
Agreed. And you probably could do it, yeah.
And the bylaws further define the charter. You have to have a provision to be able to establish the bylaws. And I think that's really what this is trying to do.
Page 37, which is
538?
No, 35 is,
Oh, A, I was starting to talk about it's either the town manager or the town manager's appointee, but that's clarifying the language that was already there. And then go to D, scope of activities, going down to division of accounting, taking out the appointed by the town board of selectmen, following what we had before.
Again, I don't have page numbers, could you call out the
This is the hard one, too.
Oh, subsection D, operating division.
subsection D of?
Part of 5.3.
5-3. There's establishment, scope of activities, where's C? Director of Finance and Services, when it goes to D, operating divisions. It's before that page, Mike, the page before.
Thank you.
Division of accounting.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
So, interesting subset. So it's 5-3, 8C, 6.
no.
No.
Eight is part of B.
How we're reading these numbers.
5-3, subsection D, subsection 3.
Got it.
And then subsection 5, we're proposing taking it out completely because actually all of those duties are under the town manager's duties, not within the division.
So, this is still a work in progress, is what I'm saying?
No, it's already in the language in the town manager. It doesn't need to be here at all. So, 6.3, submission of budget and budget method. So this is where we, instead of publishing on the local website, this is the town managers simultaneously provide for the publication of the proposed budget on a town website. Part of the thing, a general summary of the proposed budget.
Simultaneously with what?
With what she is doing, shall submit to the Finance Committee a proposed operating budget for the ensuing fiscal year. At the same time, she will publish that general message on the website. And then what we have down below, which is what people ask to make sure we have, is that summary of the budget will be mailed with the warrant to households with registered voters as provided in the town bylaws. Because currently the town bylaws provide that the warrant and the Finance Committee report is included in that, gets mailed to the household where a registered voter resides. 6.4, budget message should be an effect as opposed to effect, unless we change it to believes it will affect. Deleting the words in the presentation of the budget, the town manager will utilize modern concepts of fiscal presentation. That's presumed. Subsection A, proposed expenditures detailed by town agency appropriation. Eliminating the words in position in terms of work programs. I don't think we do anything by work programs, and that's more restrictive than may need to be. Subsection C, identify all other available sources. And we don't need to call out what those sources are. And we go to section 7-8, procedures governing multiple member bodies. Subsection B, agendas. clarifying the change in the state law, and I'm going to write it exactly the way the Attorney General said it, at least 48 hours, not including Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. Because that's what it calls out, even though that's a weekend. But, and make sure it's legal holidays, so we clarify which holidays. And then adding in the words in accordance with the general laws, just be consistent there. Changing section C, changing the word journal to minutes. We take minutes, we don't keep a journal.
Now, the second reference still has journal in it.
Oh, right.
Is it
That meant,
Got an extra word.
should have been crossing out a journal. I didn't.
I think general laws should be a capital G, capital M. And I don't mind putting in Massachusetts to go way back to that first thing. I'm just saying, nowhere, we say Commonwealth, I don't see Massachusetts. And it might be someplace, maybe I just got me some mistake. Didn't you propose? Yeah, I know, Virginia.
I don't think,
So those are three.
One was a Lunenburg, either one.
There's another Commonwealth.
I don't think there's a Lunenburg in either one of those
No, it's the
commonwealths.
definition, why not say the
Why not say
Commonwealth of
Massachusetts? I mean, why would it harm that?
General laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
I let you get full.
That's good. That's good. We'll clarify that part.
Where does it have it with a lowercase? Because then they define that differently.
Yeah.
So they-
Under B?
But they have it as
Oh,
two
so the
separate
lower,
things?
so the lower general law relates to laws that relate to cities and towns,
Okay,
or a class of two or more, so a special act,
yeah.
or something like creating the Lunenburg Water District is a small g, small general law, as opposed to the general laws that says you can't speed.
There should have been a better way to handle that.
I know. Somebody that was decided to be in there, and I don't think we even referenced that. So if you have
Oh, no, it's referenced.
the small g,
Yeah, laws and acts.
It's part of the
no,
definition.
it's in the definition, but is it ever in here? Because
I guess
if
you
it
have to read
didn't,
your
I
definition.
know, that's right. Quorum, subsection E, clarifying again the majority of the entire
Same language.
authorized as before. 7-11 was a new...
Okay, I got one for you before that.
Sure.
7-9, and it's just a misspelling. Let's see, it's about halfway through the first gigantic paragraph. It says suspension may be,
Conterminous.
it's coterminous, right?
Oh, terminus. Should be a dash, probably was a dash instead of coterminous. Suspension may be
Or
at the
was
same time as removal.
Was it meant to be contemporaneous?
No, it's coterminous.
Okay.
Good catch. 7-11, new section.
I'm going to go home and think about that.
This is not a final vote tonight. Enforcement of charter provisions and town general bylaws. Some towns, part of the thing is we have a charter, who's in charge of enforcing it? So this proposes that the town manager, it shall be the duty of the town manager to see the provision of the charter and town general bylaws are faithfully followed and complied with by all town agencies and town employees. When it appears to the town manager that any town agency employees fail to follow, the town manager shall in writing cause notice to be given such agency or employee directing compliance with the charter.
Sorry. In that sentence, did you add charter and town general bylaws and general laws? So it'd just be like, apply to everything? Because it like layers it up a little bit and then stops.
The trouble is that
Actually, yeah.
Because I just added, when you read it, you say of the charter and town general bylaws and general laws are faithfully followed.
Right, because all the accounts...
Because there's a lot of Massachusetts law that you certainly would hold.
Well, part of it is already.
Well, they all are.
So what I would say is the general laws relating to this charter, or bylaws, because we don't want her enforcing the speeding bylaw, the speeding general laws.
Okay,
We say the general law is defined in this chapter, in this charter. Trying to control it.
Because with the little g, I was like, does she have to comply to the big G laws?
Who's on the charter?
Probably.
I'll come up with some language.
Just curious.
No, that's
When I was
good.
reading it, I thought it was a little unclear.
So then it goes on to say, if it turns out that the selectman, that the town manager is not doing things correctly, going back to our concern if the town manager is doing things, it shall be direct the town manager to comply.
I added the big G into this too.
Yeah.
Is not following the provisions of the charter, town general bylaws, or general laws.
Yep.
Okay, now is this contingent upon the whole notion of where the town clerk falls, or is there
No,
any of
this is true of everything.
True of everything?
So you need to have one person to go that somebody's not following this process. Who do you go to? You go to the town manager. The manager points it out to people. Then it gets to this chapter 231A, which is you have the ability to go to the court and say, okay, we'd say it this way, and they're saying no. And this might be a possibility with a committee is not doing their duties properly.
Good.
And then the court's going to say, well, yes, they are. Town manager, you're wrong. Or, no, board, you're wrong.
And then you don't want to just leave it at the procedures made available in Massachusetts general laws may be used to determine, right?
This one's a specific section that's actually very helpful to look at. But we may want to think about taking it out and just having it available. Because if we want to be consistent, I'll say no. This has not been reviewed by town council. I don't know whether town council thinks it's a good way to do this or not. But this was pulled almost verbatim from another town's charter.
Did the town manager react to that paragraph?
No, not yet. She gave initial comments. She hasn't done the full thing.
Shouldn't have followed her chair.
8-5, continuation of government. This has been in previous town charters when they actually eliminated some positions. Any appointed or elected town official holding office on the effective date of the charter shall continue to serve unless re-elected, appointed, or his successor been qualified, or their duties have been transferred or abolished.
Okay, so does that mean like basically if you have like a town accountant or somebody in the financial office who somebody needs to be certified in something, that you hold them in their position until, so you can have an overlap of two people in the same position?
This is not an ongoing, this is as a result of a change in the charter. So for instance, say we decided to make an appointed town clerk, that the existing town clerk would stay in office for the term to the end. If saying that a finance committee member has to be a registered voter, this would say they would continue for the end of their term. This does not deal with normal carryover. That's state law already covers that. So that's the body of the existing charter. The next section, we already talked about. The first one is regarding minimum number of votes. We're not moving forward with that one. The other one is a proposal to have term limits. This has not been discussed yet. The proposal here is elected town officials shall only be eligible to serve a maximum of 3 terms in a particular office, whether by election or by appointment due to vacancy. Several different people have talked to me about the need for this. I go both ways on term limits. I believe that it's often for the voter, but there are times when it is good to open up for space for new people to come in. 1 term is clearly too short. 2 terms, you're just getting knowledge of what's going on. 3 terms, so for selectmen it would be 12 years. For planning board it would be 15.
How many other, and I don't know the answer to this, how many positions in town have terms that are less than 3 years?
That would be things like election officers. So this is, for elected, this only covers elected.
So elected, I'm sorry.
3 is the shortest.
That's school committee.
Unless it's a partial term that's being
Right,
filled.
right.
Yeah.
School committee.
So for Board of Selectmen, that would be 9, right? No, he said 12.
Yep. Sorry, 3, 9. That's right.
Whereas I would think that 12 would be more appropriate. But I also don't think that 20 years in the planning board is appropriate. So maybe the language can be adjusted here to, I'm not sure how we do this, but we say,
You would, planning board's the only 5-year term that's elected, so you say planning board, 3 terms, all other 4.
I think I'd feel more comfortable having an opinion about it. If that one, I would see as a survey question. I'd like to get a sense of...
Term limits would be a good survey
Yeah.
It's
question.
really an opinion, but a thought. I was wondering how you think of appointed, if there's some appointed positions that have a lot of control, like somebody on Conservation Commission for 30 years, sort of running it their way. Is there a point where you look at appointed versus elected, and why would you call out elected people as needing to go, but an appointed person could maybe stick around for a lifetime? It's just a thought.
I mean, this is, we're talking about, townies versus not townies, who's taking over the town, turnover. You lose expertise when you do a turnover, but the fact is you're off of this committee, get on this committee. You're elected to this one, get elected to this one. So there's plenty of positions.
And the appointing authority could address that if there was a general feeling in the community that somebody had outlived their...
Well, it wasn't an opinion.
No, but I'm just saying, but the appointing authority could
Right.
take input
Yeah.
and decide not to reappoint somebody who's been around a long time.
And in fact, that was one of the reasons what we changed in the talent bank application for new people to get in. One of the things I pushed and the board adopted was a talent bank application for reappointment, to actually get people to say, why do you want to get reappointed? What are the challenges facing you, and what do you think you can do going forward? That created a dialogue that maybe it's appropriate to bring the person back for another term that's longer because they really have this next task. And if they fill out a form that says, I'm not too sure why we should be in existence, well, then you're going to think twice about reappointing those. So I think we tried to start addressing those through that process.
And then another thing, if you would say a maximum of 3 or 4 consecutive terms, would you do a situation where somebody could have served several terms when they're young and then they're like retired and they're like, I'd love to be a selectman again. And they like maybe burn that out in their 20s. So consecutive terms could change it up, but in a small town you might need to revisit people's interest in a topic.
Good thing for the survey, come up with different questions on that.
Nitpicking, but I think it might be elected terms, because I can see somebody getting appointed to fill a term for a month,
yeah.
and then only having 2 terms elected.
Yeah, and the fact is, if somebody was appointed the day after election, they'd only be appointed for till the next election anyway, so it's
Right.
not like you're appointing them for a full term. So, yeah, that's fine. So I think if you can come up with a survey question, not necessarily with this language, but just generally about term limits.
Yeah, there were a few that,
So
I'd like to come up with
the third election item that I put on was ranked choice voting. And I don't know who knows anything about this. So the concept here, and I like the concept, I'm still getting used to it myself and what it means. The theory being is that if you have many candidates running for, say, a single position, it is possible that you could have somebody elected with 26% of the vote. I believe, and what this is saying, is that the person who's elected should get at least 50% of the vote. Plus one. Thank you, 50 plus one. And the way that's done is that whoever is the biggest vote getter keeps those. And then who's the lowest vote getter as a result of how you voted. When you vote, here's the first candidate I want, here's the second, here's the third, here's the fourth. So if there's a position, you rank the positions of those, and you get to do a write-in as well. And the person who doesn't get very many votes, those people's votes effectively are thrown away. And with this process, it goes to the next vote that they ranked it, and it gets moved to that candidate until you get 50% votes. And this works with when you have 2 positions open and there's several candidates working. The theory behind it is that you want to encourage people to run, and you want to encourage people to vote and send a message to say, I really like this person, I don't think they're going to ever get elected, but I really want to encourage them to be involved. So I'm going to vote for them, number 1, and I'm going to say vote number 2. If they can be in there, I really want this other person. So you're getting a sense of the voters of what you would be willing to settle for if you didn't get your first choice. The state of Maine has adopted this for the entire state for all its state elections, and probably federal elections within that state. Various cities and towns across the country have done this. Hadley is proposing it. Amherst, which I gave you some information, proposing it, so a lot of Western Mass. Cambridge has been doing this a long time. They actually used to have to count the ballots manually, and so you would not hear what the elections would result for at least 7 days, because they do the ballot and then they run them again and do it a second time. This can be done through electronic ballot counting.
Not to bring up write-ins, but didn't it say it doesn't work if there's too many write-ins electronically, that it would have to be counted manually?
Right. Yeah. So if you think about...
Irish Parliament has been doing it since 1926.
Okay. So if you think about the race to replace Congresswoman Tsongas, 13 Democrats and, I don't know, 8 or 9 Republicans, one of the candidates has said, I think I'm going to win because I think I'm going to get 22% of the vote for that primary. It doesn't feel right to me that 22% of those voting get to pick who's going to be the candidate within that party. Whereas if you had ranked choice voting, you're going to get to the point where we're saying, of all the people who, more than 50% will say, this is the one we think. And oh, by the way, that's really going to get a sense of what the voters are. I'll buy what they say that it tends to make a campaign a little bit better, because when you vote for somebody, what they're actually saying is that if somebody has a sign on their house and say, I'm voting for person X, but you support person Y, you're actually going to go up to them and say, all right, I know you're going to vote for X, but I want you to vote me as number 2, and here's why. As opposed to saying, I'm going to tear the sign down from your yard because I don't like X, and I'm going to put mine up. So they've been said that it actually says it's been making the elections a little bit more civil.
It's kind of like the Iowa caucus on paper.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's referred to as an instant runoff, because what happens to the lowest vote getter is they look at what the voters of the lowest vote getter assigned as number 1 and number 2, and those votes then are divvied up between number 1 and number 2, depending on what the voters chose as their first choice and their second choice. And if you get to 50% plus 1 at that point, you're good. Well, you have to actually, after you've divvied them up that way.
I think this is one of those ones that's going to sink the whole thing if we have to do the education behind it, and I'd much rather see the education be done at the federal or state level, and if it ever gets to the point where everybody understands it, we address it at the charter level.
I agree with you, Jamie. I'm sitting here digesting this. I've heard of this before, and I think it's too complicated. Because I think that the other changes that we're proposing are, I think, more digestible, and I think that it's radical. I think that we're all used to the concept of one person, one vote, and I think this is a little bit different.
Still one person, one vote. It's just
one person, you can multiple votes.
Just think about my vote is
One person,
thrown out.
one ballot.
Yeah, one person, one ballot.
So I will accept that, and I actually put this out there for the initial discussion. I think it's too soon for this charter. It came up recently. It's a movement. I think it's a good thing. It could actually be done separately from the charter, because it's not if the town voted this separately, it could do it. It wouldn't be in contradiction of the charter or anything else like that, so we could certainly do that. So unless anybody's opposed, I will take this off the list for us to consider. So the 3 proposed election changes, we're going to still consider term limits, and we will decide whether we want to propose going forward. It'll be interesting to see what the results are on that. So we normally try to get out of here at 8:30. It's 9 o'clock, which is actually a very efficient meeting that we had. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think we need to add in that we will come up at our next meeting?
I feel like we didn't cover town.
I think that we should get today a feel for appointed versus elected town clerk. I'd like to know where we're at.
Thank you for bringing that up.
I did think that would be something that I also want to put in a survey format, now that I understand this point. I think that Heather's presentation on the whole notion that there's a lot of requirements coming up in that position that may make it something that it's better to to have someone apply for and be hired with having certain qualifications for it. I think that it's easier to frame the question than I thought it would be before. And I think, because basically, unless I heard from the town clerk, or unless I heard a reason, I'm not sure how I sit on that, and I'm not sure I'm ready to make a call.
So the other part is that the assumption is that in the other parts of the charter is that elected boards that make policy are the ones that really make the policy, and the town clerk really doesn't make policy.
Right.
What I also...
That's what I said earlier about, this kind of ministerial role versus a policy-making role.
I also think it's important because the town clerk has announced that you include in there that the current town clerk has announced that she's not going to run for re-election. If that's the case, what is your feeling about replacing that position, and here's the reasons?
Right. And I think the other thing, well, there's also no reason to not state in there, like you already have in there, that basically if that change were to occur, that the person currently in the position would become an appointed position. Like she would just automatically be appointed into the position.
No, not necessarily.
Well,
She would keep her position until the end of the term, and then could be appointed. It's not, it goes to the term.
And in this particular case, what is the end of the term? Just curious.
Next year.
Okay.
So if this was adopted this year at town meeting, and the town clerk was made appointed, she would continue to serve until that point. She could be reappointed at that point if she chose, but she has stated that she's going to retire.
Okay. Well, I'm just also basically, I guess what I'm, okay.
So she remains elected until the end of the term. She doesn't become appointed as part of this. So she's
But
still...
you could.
Only after the end
No,
of
but I
the
mean, for
term.
the rest of her term, she would still be an elected official.
No. But I guess what I'm saying is that if you're going to have people who are going to, okay, so she changes her mind.
And runs again.
Or she...
No, the position won't be eligible for
Election, right.
For election, so
But
she can't
she
run
would be
again.
eligible for appointment.
She could be eligible.
She could apply to be appointed.
Sure.
And that's what...
And her many years of experience would be
Show that
a
she's...
qualification.
One would hope. I just don't want, people who might be invested in that whole, in the person who's in the position,
Sure.
that I think that it should just automatically roll into that person's in the position, that person will stay in the position until they leave. Because otherwise, if she was going to run again...
But see, the thing is, you wouldn't do it until they leave. You would have to be subject to the evaluations, personnel...
Right.
review of-
Yeah. I mean, basically, when I say it's an appointed position...
Appointed for a term.
Well, no, I wasn't going to do it for a term.
So if you're taking a straw poll on that, I think it should be appointed. I think in this day and age, the qualifications that you need to have to do that job and do it effectively should be part of the selection process. I don't think it should be left to an election. I think it should be left to careful scrutiny and selection of the most qualified candidate.
Jamie?
I agree, and I think it also should be supervised in the course of town government as opposed to the electorate who might not even know what they're looking for in terms of qualifications.
I agree.
Katie?
I'm inclined to stay with elected and analyze the role of any other elected person and whether or not they're technically qualified. And the fact that maybe not, but there's sort of, since we're dealing with government and not a business, I don't like to take things away from people.
Michael?
I feel very strongly that the town clerk should be elected. I think that she is answerable, she answers to the people. I understand that it is an inherent conflict within the organization and the functioning of government, and I think it's a necessary conflict. So it's nice to have someone involved in town government who answers who's in the hands-on work, who answers directly to the people. And I think that has been an institution in this town, and it needs to remain an institution in this town.
Mike?
I'm strongly in support of an appointed town clerk. It requires a certain level of expertise that you cannot do. Policymaking boards such as the school committee and the Board of Selectmen, you're not bringing in a certain necessary package of knowledge in order to do your task. You're tasked to look at the big picture, make some judgments around the big picture, and direct things that way. Whereas a town clerk is a ministerial job. It has a lot of regulatory and legal requirements that someone needs to be knowledgeable of. I felt comfortable running for school committee. I felt comfortable running for the Board of Selectmen. The idea that I would be town clerk scares the hell out of me. It's just kind of... And the reason being is that the requirements of the job require a base of knowledge in order for it to be done, and a base of professionalism. It doesn't make policy, it doesn't, and in many ways, it doesn't, people say, well, it's answerable to the people. I'm not quite sure, besides running elections and taking care of town meeting, that people actually know what the day-to-day operation is in the town clerk's office. And, the kind of day-to-day tasks that are required. It's a job.
That is true, it's the only salaried
It's the
elected
only
position.
salaried elected position in town.
Technically, the selectmen get $100 apiece.
Oh, I remember the stipend.
I wanted to talk to you about that.
We can get rid of that. We can say the
I'd
town
love to
manager.
get rid of it.
Well,
No, why don't you keep it and just spend it on chairs that don't sink?
I think
Yeah.
that's a separate discussion. That's a separate
Is
discussion.
that a charter discussion or is that something?
No, that's, the state law says that elected officials' salaries have to be called out separately, and it's called out separately in the budget. So the town clerk's salary is called out separately.
No, I'm just saying, if we were going to change that, is that a charter issue or a bylaw issue or
No,
maybe neither?
it's just not appropriating money.
It's
Yeah, you just put zero.
I think it's Massachusetts general law, because there are school committees that actually get paid.
Yeah. Assessors used to get paid here. That was back in the days when we didn't have professional running the office. You had elected officials running the thing, including the tax collector who had to collect your taxes or kick you out of the house. Terry, your opinion on town clerk?
I'm torn. I think that and the reason I'm torn is I don't know what the town clerk, okay, so the town clerk oversees elections. So the town clerk is technically supervised by people who she might need to call out. And I don't know if that's true or not. So I don't know if there's a potential conflict there. But I also see that there is definitely a movement among the other towns to have the town clerk be an appointed position, and I understand why that would happen too. Again, that's going to be one of those, is this going to make or break the charter? I would put that in the survey and just get a sense of whether or not that's going to make or break the charter. I think I would probably, by the time we get to an actual vote, I will probably be leaning more towards appointment.
So, as a former town clerk, who at that point supported elected town clerks, because at that time we didn't have a charter, we didn't have a town manager, we had selectmen that are not the way the selectmen are now. You also had a 3-member board of selectmen that had a lot more power because there were 3 as opposed to 5. I'm now believing that this position should be appointed, and the opportunity is now because Kathy is retiring. I've looked at the things. You've got the record keeping of the town. You've got communications with the public. I think it really is ministerial, and I appreciate both of your comments as far as the feedback. But the ability to affect change in government, I think government now, with everything being online and everything being so public and everything being televised, that there is such a change for transparency. I think this is the big difference. So,
Is there a job description for? Because that would be interesting.
Yeah, I will take the responsibility to get that job description in towns that have it, and there's also
That's in line.
So we're not taking an official vote. We got the straw vote here, and as we said, there's going to have to at least be 6 people that will want to do it. I understand the concept of syncing the charter. At the same time, we need to do what we think is the best thing within the whole process. Let me just move us quickly. Let's do a straw vote of select board versus selectmen.
Before we move to that, I was thinking of something Terry just brought up about the clerk isn't defined in here, and other elected positions come up and are talked about, and it's completely absent from the charter.
No, the clerk is in there.
The clerk.
It's highlighted in yellow.
Like the job description, like
Right, he has a job,
I
right?
guess what I'm saying is if there's things that we feel aren't being done correctly, or whether it was elected or appointed, are there things that, let's say it was kept elected, are there things that could be done to put more control or more guidance to what needs to be done once elected? I guess is what I'm trying to
We
say.
can come with, hold that thought till we get the job description, as far as whether the language should change. So that if you're proposing that if that was the case, then we might keep it elected, but with some additional language.
Well, it seems that people have a lot of concerns that it doesn't function correctly, and even if it was
No.
kept...
Oh,
I don't think that's it at all.
It's like basically, so if I wanted to be the town clerk and I ran for town clerk, I might not necessarily have any of the qualifications that would be helpful to be a good town clerk.
Who would you run? I think that's kind of my
I
question.
might.
But the fact is, because of the salary,
People vote,
because of the
yeah.
salary, people will run for the
And
position.
it's only 4 days a week, and it's like 4 miles from my house, so it's a shorter commute.
I honestly, I'm having a struggle thinking of me putting myself, and I guess maybe I assume that most people are similar, but who would put themselves willingly in a position
You would
in
be
front of your
amazed.
entire town
Yeah.
You would be
to run
amazed.
for a job that you're underqualified?
But it's also, but I think,
But you may not even know you're not qualified. You
Right.
don't even know what they need to do.
and then conversely, if I wanted to be the town clerk, and I was qualified to be the town clerk, I wouldn't want to have a public job appraisal every 3 years, when somebody else might want to run for that position who is more popular, but not necessarily as
No,
efficient.
every year when they vote your salary, or cut your salary.
But
That's how
to go on a complete extreme and not to say one thing or the other, but there's not usually qualifications in government, like even to run for president of the United States. No, I'm serious.
Okay, you've just made our case.
No, but now you're trying to apply rules to something that's very small that we don't apply to other parts of government, and the town isn't a business, it's a government.
Yeah,
Because it's a ministerial role, it's a job.
So-
It's a job that has a defined role that has no day-to-day supervision. It's a job that is not supervised on a day-to-day basis.
And that's
It
where
does-
the other elected bodies are, the policy-making bodies, and that's why we started adding the language to get out of the day-to-day organization of it, because the elected bodies shouldn't be running those departments. And that's where...
I think the real beauty here is that even though we all have a lot of trust and faith in town government, I think if you have one person there who's not appointed, who's not sipping the Kool-Aid, so to speak, every 3 years you get them running a campaign that basically highlights any other problems, because no one else in the building is their boss.
I've never seen that happen in the years that I've been here.
Because I don't think that it would. I think it creates the opportunity, and that's really, I think, why I think it's so critical to have it there as a voice. It's almost like a whistleblower, so to speak.
And
So-
we can talk about this a lot more.
Yeah,
I
no, well,
think
so I think the survey,
Things
I think
to hear.
that this communication will go out on the cable. We'll get the job description, we'll have another opportunity. I think the survey, getting this out sooner than later would be good. I'll get more information from other towns as well.
And that's why I'd be curious, the job description, but also other towns, what are their requirements or qualifications? Is it a this and a that, how many year degree?
That should be in the
You shall
job
have done this or that.
Yep, good.
We wouldn't have that in our job description because anybody can be it.
Right.
Towns that have gone to appointed would have.
Yeah, we will get that too.
But yeah,
Good point.
I also understand your point.
Select board versus selectman, Terry.
I don't care.
Okay, that's fine. Mike?
Uh,
Michael, you've already stated, but state it again.
Select board.
Yeah.
Okay. Katie?
Doesn't matter, fine, that's the way it is.
Okay. All
Select board.
right. Jamie?
I don't care. I'm not sure I care either.
Okay. I could go either way. I think select board sends a message, and it's not a hurt. I immediately go to operationalize that everybody else will still be calling us selectmen. Well, that may be the case, but we're sending the message that it is, so I'd be fine with going with select board.
I'd be fine with going with it too, I really don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, basically, yeah, I could vote to support it.
Okay.
I would just miss the acronym, but that's fine.
Okay, any other business to come before us?
Yeah, the new one's not so good.
So what we're trying to do is trying to get something before town meeting. The warrant closes on Monday, the 23rd of March.
Thursday the 22nd?
Yes, Thursday, the 22nd.
Thursday the 22nd.
4 p.m.
So, it's proposed that we meet next week, Wednesday, and the following Wednesday, with the idea that we've actually taken care of just about everything. We need to come back, and we will make sure that the vote on the town clerk, everybody is available before we finish that, and we may even take adopt our rules to allow a vote by proxy on that one issue, so that we have full vote on that part. I think that's important. And then the theory would be is that we would vote a draft charter change that would go to the warrant. We would keep working on it and seeing what other things may need to be done before town meeting, and then submit the final thing before town meeting. So it's important that we have as much of a done product that we can live with and send that out. And that part, we also have to come up with a charter report talking about it, and it can be a majority vote and a minority report as well. So can people make the 7th and the 14th?
Yes.
I was hoping to be at the school committee next Wednesday. There's a discussion around public input in the superintendent search.
I thought they were doing that tonight.
That's how it's nice.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's why Phyllis came early.
Okay. Then I was at the wrong place tonight.
Okay. No, you were at the right place tonight. Who knows, they may be having another. I know they're going to have several sessions on that one. I think that was the initial discussion. Okay, so we'll meet the 7th, 14th, and the 28th. Your motion?
We have public comments.
Oh, any public comment from the public?
I think this was great.
Oh,
I don't know what.
great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.